Hey guys, it's been a while since I've done one of these, and I just want to take a quick moment. I won't take a lot of your time. One of the favorite pastors that I enjoy listening to is Apostle Damon Thompson, and he talks about a concept where everybody likes or wants an end result, but they don't like the process of getting to that end result. And he talks about how in the Bible, so much of the time, the process that gets somebody to the end result where God wants them isn't actually a process, it's the wilderness. The Bible talks about how the Israelites spent time in the wilderness. You know, Elijah, Elisha, David, Jesus, John, time in the wilderness. Time for which God could process them for who He wants them to be. And I want to talk to you for a moment out of the end of chapter 24 of 1 Samuel and the beginning of chapter 25. And I don't want to take up a whole lot of your time, but if you wanted to read 24 verse 16 all the way through chapter 25, say call it verse 1 and 2. Saul says here, I know now beyond doubt that you will rule as king. The kingdom of Israel is already in your grasp. Now promise me under God that you will not kill off my family and wipe out my name from the books. David promised Saul. Then Saul went home, and David and his men went up until their wilderness refuge. So Saul knows that he is not intended to be king any longer, and he knows that David is going to be king. David knows that he's going to be king. Everybody's got the memo, but David goes home to a wilderness refuge, and Saul goes back to being king. It seems strange to me that both these men, knowing that the outcome is opposite of what they're getting ready to do, David's going back into the wilderness, Saul's going back home to rule Israel, sit upon the throne and make decrees. But both of them know that the role of David is to be king. Then if we go on a little bit further, Samuel dies, the whole country goes to the funeral, everyone's grieving. Meanwhile, David moved again, this time to the wilderness of Moab. Okay, David knows he's supposed to be king. Saul knows he's supposed to be king. Samuel anointed him king. Samuel passes on. What does David do? Does he go and take control over Israel? Does he go and become king? No. He refuses multiple times to kill Saul, and he presses further into the wilderness. What was David doing? What did David understand that so many times we don't? Let me throw this out there. We tend to, a lot of times, want the end result. We want to be king, but we don't want to tend the sheep. We don't want to face down giants, and we don't want to spend any time in the wilderness. And I think David, through his time tending sheep and his time facing down giants, he understood what it took to be God's anointed. That's the reason he couldn't kill Saul, because he knew that no matter where Saul was at now in life, that he was God's anointed, and that he was chosen for a reason. And it wasn't his place to remove that, it was God's. So David had an understanding that we don't always have. David understood that he wasn't where he needed to be. And what he needed to focus on was him. And that's why he kept returning to the wilderness until that time that God removed Saul and placed David upon the throne. What does that mean for us in our everyday lives? That means that while we may know the end result of where God wants us to be, we also need to be wise enough to understand that if we're not there, it's probably because God's not through getting us ready to be there. So we need to let God do the work that He needs to do in us. And sometimes that's processing us in a wilderness place, in a place out of prying eyes, in a place where we can be alone with Him. The other thing that we need to understand is that maybe we're destined to take over for somebody else, and that somebody else is not done with their time or their ministry. I honestly believe God, much like the major leagues, has the next pitcher warming up in the bullpen long before they're actually needed. We know that the Bible is full of stories of people who worked underneath someone else before they came into their own, and I think that's true today as well. There is time for process. Jesus had a very short ministry, but accomplished a great deal. We don't know how long some of the disciples' ministries lasted, but if we're to believe church history, not very long. Guys, there's no rush to become what it is God intends you to be. If you rush the process, You will miss the skill that He wants you to have that will allow you to be who He wants you to be. I'm not saying sit around and do nothing. I'm saying take what God gives you, steward it, and wait until He puts the dream that He's planted in your heart in your hand. Guys, I love you. God bless you. Have a good night.